Alright, everybody, welcome to another developer cast here on the Game Wisdom channel. I am Josh Beiser, and we have another great one for you tonight. My guest is the game designer over at Elden Pixels, whose previous game was Alwa's Awakening. It was a modern retro action adventure platformer that was deceptively challenging in some of its platforming, and it ended with one heck of a twist that they are now going to Kickstarter to see if they can answer that with Alwa's legacy. So please welcome to the cast, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing great. It is fantastic to have you on. Thank you again for agreeing to come on to the cast.
No worries at all. It's great to be on the cast.
hmm And right now, as we are doing this cast, the Kickstarter for Alwa's Legacy is going on, and you
Yep.
guys are just shy of 17,000. So, congratulations on what you've gotten so far, and definitely best of luck with hitting your goal.
Yeah. Thank you. We're really struggling to hard to reach our goal, but I think we're doing fine, and we had a good start, and I feel really confident that we should reach 100% pretty soon. So yeah, but we need all the help we can get.
hmm And I'm hoping that this podcast will help you guys out. And of those
Yep.
of you watching this, we're going to try and do at some point during the next few days or so a spotlight of the backer demo for All Walls Legacy, kind of get some more buzz for you. But
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot to talk about tonight. So to begin with, since this is your first time on the cast, Michael, for people watching us live or recorded, could you talk a little bit about your background and what is Alwa's Awakening and, by extension, Alwa's Legacy?
Yes, my background. That's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. Basically, I've like many others, I've been a fan of video games since I was like 5 or 6. I got the old NES from my dad, like one of the first. I actually got the Famicom before I got the NES back in 86, 87 or something like that. And I always been interested in video games, playing them and trying to make them myself. But I'd actually never really pursued making video games until 6 or 7 years ago, because basically all my life I worked in a video store, and up until a few years ago we had quite a lot of video stores here in Sweden, but they kind of quickly disappeared like the last 5 or 6 years. And I've realized I should find something else to work with besides working in the video store. So I went to business school actually and studied marketing and sales, and ended up doing an internship at a studio called Coffee Stain Studios here in Sweden. They're mostly known for Goat Simulator, but now they're making Satisfactory. And that internship led to me getting hired at Image and Form and Zoink Games, which are two developers here in Gothenburg, Sweden, where I live in. And I worked there for let's see, about 4 years, I think, altogether on both companies, doing mostly marketing, sales, office managing, product managing, and stuff like that. Not really anything that had to do with designing games, but on the side, I always been a fan of making stuff. Making music, making art, making you know, creating fun stuff to work with. And that led to me and a couple of friends on the side of our normal day jobs, which were at Zoink Games. We started working with Alwa's Awakening, just like a side project, just for fun, just for creativity, with no big plans of releasing the game commercially in that sense. And we started with that in 2015, and that eventually led to being a released game in early 2017. And all this Awakening was just made on like weekends, nights, like during 2 quite hectic years of development. But we still had our normal day jobs. And that game came out in early 2017, and in the plan was kind of to release the game and you know don't really do much more about it, because the goal was to release the game on Steam, and that was pretty much it. But people kept asking for ports, they kept asking for a Switch version, they kept asking for more content, and kept asking about us to keep working with the game. So eventually in 2018 we kind of realized that, okay, the first game, Alwa's Awakening, had been such a small but still a success in to that extent, and we decided to actually give up our day jobs and pursue this indie game development career for real. So it was me, the programmer, and the artist who did the art on the Alwa's Awakening. So since 2018, early 2018, we've been doing in Elden Pixels, our company, full time, and we have been working on Alva's Legacy basically most of the time for 1.5 years now.
Great.
Yeah,
And like with something like All's Awakening, that was released in 2017. So that was like
correct.
kind of like around the time like we've kind of been like firmly established with having this kind of quote unquote modern retro market for a
Yeah.
lot of games. I guess my next question for you, Michael, is like what was like the inspiration for going like modern retro with like the first game for you guys?
The thing is with Alva's Awakening, it actually started as a NES homebrew project. We started writing assembly code and tried to get that to work, and we did get it to work, but it was so much work for so little result. So we actually abandoned doing an own NES version of Alva's Awakening in early 2015, I'd say, and then we decided, should we continue working on the game and select another engine to work with and make it a more modern game, and or give it up. But we decided to keep on working with it and switch to Unity in 2015. And the inspiration for Alva's Awakening basically came from, I'd say, a combination of an old NES game called the Battle Kid, which is this super tough, challenging screen by screen platformer that is like Mega Man, but 10 times more challenging. And also a series of video games called Trine. They are releasing part four now. I
Yeah.
think I've only played the two first. And what I really liked about Trine was that it didn't really focus that much on action. It mostly focused on the puzzle part, the combination of two players working together, three players if you have two friends over. And the setting was just cool, I thought. So we decided that we should try to make Alva's Awakening a combination of a challenging platformer, but still have the focus on exploration, adventuring, and using your magic skills in clever ways instead of actually defeating the enemies. So we didn't really want to have the game focus on any action at all, really. And the enemies are there, but they're merely an obstacle in your way of traversing forward.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting in terms of the design. Like, for instance, I'm recently on stream. I'm playing through Ori and the Blind Forest, which is a fantastic
Yeah,
platformer, and there's definitely a greater focus on the combat side of that compared to something like Alwa's Awakening, and I'm assuming by extension Alwa's Legacy. And it's always challenging, I think, with a lot of these games to know just how much the combat should kind of be, I guess, like the priority of the design.
yeah,
Um, Now, one thing I forgot to ask, I always like to do this when we have international guests on,
yeah.
is for, like, again, like, my audience definitely consists of a lot of people in the United States, although I do have an international following. I'm just curious, like, how is, like, the state of the game scene? And I think you're based out of that Gothenburg, Sweden?
Yeah, that's correct.
Hmm.
How the game scene here is in Gothenburg.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say compared to other cities, but in Sweden there are three big cities, and we are the second biggest city, and Stockholm is by far the biggest when it comes to like they have the Rovio, they have a lot of huge developers. But Gothenburg is kind of like known as the indie part of Sweden. There's a lot of smaller indie devs here. As I mentioned earlier, both Zoink Games and Image and Form are based here, and there are a few other known names coming out of Gothenburg here as well. What we've been fortunate enough to, we actually have our small office space next to two other game studios. So we're sharing like a huge office with Retroid Interactive, who's also a smaller indie dev, and Sky Goblin, who's been releasing indie games for like the last 10 years or so. And that's kind of cool about the indie game development, that you don't see any of the other companies like competitors. You just see them as friends,
Yeah.
and that's really cool, I think.
And that's something that we see a lot from the other developers we've had over these casts. That
Yeah,
everyone, it's definitely been like a very much like a club for everyone to enjoy and enjoy everyone's success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're not really competing with each other. You're kind of competing with people, how much time they spend on video games, because there's only so many hours on the day, and in that sense you're kind of competing, but you're not competing about the same customers, you're not competing about the same money. So we're always like sharing secrets and stuff like that. If I go over and ask how much did you make on that, was it worth it, how much did you pay, there are no secrets like in indie game development, especially here in Gothenburg. I think that's really cool, helps you a lot to find out facts.
Yeah, it's great to hear.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to Alwa's Awakening, then,
Yeah.
in terms of the design, like you mentioned some of the games you were inspired by with creating it, and the one that always like stuck out to me for some strange reason was something like Milton's Secret Castle from way back in the day with the whole bubble mechanic, as you're able to like create the bubble and kind of use that to float up and around objects. I guess one of the big things about the game, as we said, is it has a heavy emphasis on the puzzle solving or kind of the transversal challenges.
Yeah.
What was some of like the design decisions in terms of figuring out what you wanted to test the player with like moving from one area to the next?
We designed the game too so that each screen is like a small puzzle in itself. Like, we always have the design philosophy that if you enter a room, you never get hit by anything. There aren't any action coming straight at you. There aren't any enemies walking to you. So you can always enter a room, and they are always one screen each, and you can always stay there for like a few seconds, just analyzing. Okay, what's the challenge here? And we try to divide the different rooms into kind of, is it an action room? Is it a puzzle room? Is it a room where you have to move fast, where speed is your friend? And we kind of try to pace every other room so there's aren't like two action rooms next to each other. There's always like a puzzle, movement, action, and then you repeat the cycle. And I think in that sense the pacing works. And once you get the pattern down on each room, you can always fly through each room with graceful movement, because you never get hit once you figure out the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And the action rooms there are action rooms, but they're mostly like about challenging the player, about making right platform jumps, and fighting as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the power so you get in the game, and if I'm forgetting, please refresh my memory. But I remember you have the green block, the blue
Yeah.
bubble,
Yep.
and I think I'm forgetting a third power.
Yeah, you have a lightning bolt, which
Okay.
works both for puzzles and for offensive attacks.
Mm-hmm. With like those specific mechanics in play, were there any other elements you were thinking about including in Alwa's Awakening in terms of like more mechanics, or did you kind of settle on like your core skills like very early on?
We did experiment with one more ability, but the thing is, we developed the game, as I mentioned earlier. It started out as an NES homebrew, and then you only have the 8 buttons, and 4 are directional, and you have select the start and only A and B. So we kind of realized if you wanted to change magic, you needed to use the select button, and you can only go from left to right while changing magics. So we ended up doing 3 magic spells, like the block bubble and the lightning bolt, because then you're always just 2 pushes away from selecting the correct magic. If you had 4, it would
Mm-hmm.
be 3
Yeah.
pushes, and we thought that was kind of one too much, and that's why we ended up on 3 magics. And I think that works pretty well. But they are upgrades to it. But that was also something we wanted to like in the Zelda games. A lot of the upgrades you don't really have to select them and use them. They are normally like very well
Yeah.
incorporated in the game world. Like you have your hook shots and whatever, and they just expand in height or length or strength or whatever. And that's something we adjusted to as well. So
Mm-hmm.
with the only jump and attack button, that's you can maneuver through the entire world, and you can use all your items. So you never go into the item selection or select anything, and that's something we really wanted, because I think a lot of the games are too, in my taste, of course, it's highly personal, but I think we wanted to make a game where it's not focused on the items; it's just
Mm-hmm.
focused on movement and exploration.
Yeah. And like with the world itself, again, like it was very interesting to play I Was Awaiting back in 2017 with just that sheer amount of the exploration side of things, because I really wasn't, again, when we play, like, I have played so many modern retro games this past decade that you never know
Yeah.
what to get or what to really see in terms of the kind of gameplay. In terms of building the world itself, as you say, you originally started this as kind of like a homebrew project for the NES, and then
Yeah.
it kind of grew from there. In terms of world size, did you have like that pretty much settled from the beginning, or did things kind of grow or even shrink over the course of development?
I think we had a pretty basic outline of the entire world quite early in the progress. But what was challenging designing grid by group that like as you moved further into the development and more were added and locked into, it was kind of hard to change something because the huge grid, all grids were taken by different rooms. So if you wanted to change one room in one dungeon, you had to change everything surrounding those areas. So it was kind of hard to design, but uh, quite early we decided on the way the game should look, and you had your basic, forests and swamps and dungeons and stuff like that. And since it's an NES inspired game, we used the old palette swap, which was common in those days, where you had
Mm-hmm.
your green temple, your red temple, your purple temple. And although we didn't reuse that many tiles, some of them are used, which I just think adds to the style of the whole type of gameplay, I say.
Mm-hmm. A quick question came in from Child in chat. He was
Yeah,
curious about, in terms of Alwa's legacy,
yeah.
are there any new changes to the mechanics or systems besides just going from 8-bit to 16-bit?
Yes, there are. There are basically two major improvements. One is that the upgrades you have to your block bubble and lightning bolt, there's like a skill tree. You could select whichever way you want to upgrade, which means that if you want to play offensive, you can use your upgrades on your lightning bolt, and that would help you progress further into the game using that. Or you could be more explorative, and you can upgrade your bubble or your block. And that's it's always you have to decide yourself which way you want to go and which way you want to explore. And that's one of the things we added, which we thought was really cool. Gives more the player can decide themselves which way they want to progress. And besides that, we have a new system we call ability. It's There are four of them, and they work in conjunction with your normal magic skills. So there's like an additional button that you have to select, and it's basically different. I won't spoil too much about what kind of mechanics we have, but in the demo we're going to show, which you're going to play, you'll have one shield ability, which lets you safely traverse like dangerous spikes and stuff like that. And you have to use that power like quite carefully because it's only limited for a few seconds, and you can only use it one time per room. And if you end up using it, you have to recharge it. And you have to, as the game progresses, you have to learn to switch between these abilities while you still have to use your magic. So it works really well. And although it's one more button, it's still very, very easy to pick up and play. And it's like even like a young child can play the game and have fun with it. But still, there's a lot of depth to the upgrade system, which I think really works really well.
Great. And if anyone has any questions for Michael regarding Alwa's Awakening or Legacy, feel free to post them in chat as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, we'll talk more about Alwa's Legacy probably in the next few minutes. Um,
cool,
Getting back to Awakening, I have a few more questions for you, and if there's anything
yeah,
you want to bring up, definitely feel free to do that as well, Michael. Um,
cool.
with the actual challenge of the game itself, this is one thing I was really curious about, because again, with so many games that are involved with like kind of modern retro design, we've seen definitely that push between making a classic game but making it easier, or going classic and going even harder than they were back in the day. And like I said at the start, Owl's Awakening is very, I think, deceptive in terms of its challenge. Like, you don't think there's a lot to it, But then one of the things I remember, especially in like I think it was like the penultimate or the ultimate section, is you really get crafty with having to combine your powers very quickly. So, a bubble into a block into another bubble to try to get around like spike rooms, for instance.
Yeah.
So, in terms of, I guess, the difficulty level that you were approaching with the game, how did you settle, I guess, on, what kind of player skill level you wanted for Alwa's Awakening?
I think like the whole concept of the basic design for Alwa's Awakening came from that we saw a lot of games for kind of trying emulating retro style, but didn't really nail the whole 8-bit look. So we made sure we went all the way. Like not only had an 8-bit look, we actually used the limitation to the NES. So we had like four colors per tile and stuff like that. And that really was a logic choice for us. And we extended that to the design as well because I mean, I grew up playing all those. I remember playing the first Legend of Zelda games, and you didn't have any sense of direction where you should go. You didn't get any instructions, and all the tips the NPCs, like the old guy, were telling you were just too weird to figure out. So that's the kind of design we went for in Alva's Awakening as well. You're really just dropped into this world. You don't really know where to go. You don't really know where you've been, what's going on, and you just traverse the world. And I'd say in hindsight, I could probably redo a couple of things. There's too much insta-death in the Alva's Awakening, I'd say,
Mm.
but you're sitting there designing the game in your own room, and you have really no idea what people can think. And we did extensive amount of testing. Like we had a lot of people helped us throughout the development. But I think most of the people who helped us were also fans of these super challenging NES games. So no one really complained about the difficulty. But
Mm.
and I don't think anyone really does complain about the difficulty. But um, I think a lot of a lot of people thinks it's really challenging. But what we did is that we added a death count. So each time you die, you have this game over screen, which says how many times you die. So even if you keep on dying, it kind of ends up becoming like a fun thing. You'll see your death count growing up, and we have a lot of people just, oh, I finished the game and I had 100 or 200 or 300 death counts, and it's always fun to compare that stat because it's no shame in having like 300 death counts when you finish the game. But what we did when we released the Switch version, which came out about a year ago in late 2018, was that we added something called assist mode, which I think Celeste was the one who helped populate it into the broader terms. It's basically a mode that you can put on, and instead of dying and respawning at a checkpoint, we have to do like 5 or 10 rooms. You just respawn in the same room, and it's no penalty for the player. It's just an easier setting if you want to experience the game, but you don't have to redo all the rooms again. And we thought that worked really well. And we have that the same setting in Alva's Legacy as well.
Mm. Yep, and as you were saying there regarding like the death traps, I think that's another very polarizing point for a lot of people. Because
Yeah,
again, like I think like yourself and probably my audience watching this right now, we all grew up playing the old school games. I've
yeah,
died to many spikes in Mega Man, for instance,
yeah,
and that's always tricky in terms of again like what elements to bring back from classic games and what elements you get rid of. Because I remember with something like Shovel Knight, they also used spikes as a death pit, but
yeah.
they had a lot more. They had the invincibility power and more in terms of checkpoints.
Yeah.
And again, like you never know really, what your audience is going to respond to with these kinds of old school designs.
No, exactly. You just put the game out there, and you get the you get the reaction. What I think it's quite funny is we did we did the entire development of Alva's Awakening for like close to 2 years, but at the end of the development cycle, we added the last temple, the end game dungeon,
Mm.
and we've done so many rooms, and we were so skilled in the level design, and we knew how to make creative rooms. So we did the last dungeon quite fast, actually, and that dungeon is super hard. It's super long between
Yes.
checkpoints. Everything kills you, and it's fun to hear because we get two people. I did get the one who says, "I love that dungeon because it really you need to stay on your toes. You need to know exactly where to go. You need to combine all your magic attacks." And then there are people who just absolutely think it's horribly challenging and almost ends up rage quitting. And it always either one of those. And I thought that was fun. Either you love it or you hate it. But besides the final dungeon, I think the game is pretty good balanced. There are some challenging areas, but it's not that hard, I'd say. Easy for me to say who made the game, but you know.
Hmm. And I can't say either, even though I definitely did beat the game all the way through.
Oh, it did. Cool.
Yeah. I guess like speaking about that kind of difficult. I think one thing that was like another like polarizing point from some people was the amount of like backtracking and
Yeah.
old school exploration. As you said a few times already, a major part of Alwa's Awakening is this idea of you're dropping into the world, start wandering around, see what you can find. And
Yeah.
that's definitely one of the more old school ways of designing a game. Again, what we see today is a lot more games are railroaded or they're a lot more linear in terms of, hey, maybe you should go over here first and then go over there and get that
Yeah.
power up. And I do remember I did get lost, I think, several times the first time I played through Awakening. I did get
Yeah.
better when I played it a second time on stream, but again, like when you're trying to balance a game around kind of old and new sensibilities, I guess how much did you like look into? I guess again, like just kind of letting the player off their leash in terms of exploring.
Yeah. Once again, it's super hard knowing you should get allowed to get lost. But I remember like mid development of Always Awakening, the Game Maker Toolkit, another YouTube channel, he released a video called "Getting Lost in Axiom Verge." I think it was Game Maker Toolkit, but it was an interesting video about the design of Axiom Verge, which is another great Metroidvania. And basically the video said there's nothing really wrong about allowing the player to be lost at times, but it kind of helps you to realize, okay, where should I go, and allow the player to find their own way. And that was something I took to heart. So I made sure that you're not really told where to go, but we did make sure that whatever way you go, there's always there's always a way back. Like you never go into 10 rooms and then end up in a dead end. You always loop back to something. So
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't find your way forward, at least you find a couple of power ups or a new way, or you open a shortcut. So there's always something rewarding at the end of a cycle, and it always loops you back to whatever you came from in the beginning or into a new area. So there aren't any dead ends, and I think that helps a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
if you get lost, there's always like a loop back to whatever you came from.
Yeah.
But sure, there are items that need to be found, and some are more hidden than others. But overall, I think the item progression and getting lost isn't that bad. But it's hard for me to say because I knew every inch of the game as well. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember. I think it was in the second dungeon or the
yeah,
second temple that there was a shortcut to a cavern or it connected somewhere else. I remember I kind of missed that shortcut and I had to go back like the long way around. And
yeah,
yeah, and I think I do remember. I think it was like around like the halfway to three-quarter point. I was getting a little bit frustrated. I knew what I needed. I just didn't know how to get to where I needed. And
yeah,
again, like that's one of the more like interesting parts about some of these designs. Like as you said, the world itself doesn't have any. There's very few in terms of like dead ends. You go and then it's just like you cannot go this way. You must retread 20, 30 screens.
yeah.
And for something like Alwa's Awakening, with like kind of the upgrade system and how it's like built into the world itself, I'm trying to think with like the challenges of the game again. Like, how did you know? I guess how hard you really want to make the game. So I'm sure you guys thought of even harder challenges with Alwa's Awakening. Like, what was kind of like the line that you kind of set for yourselves in terms of how difficult you wanted to make the world?
That's a good question. I don't know really. We did a lot of testing, and I think there is a natural progression to the game that you can, like, there are temples that show up in the proper order if you follow the progression line. So, and we made sure that they became increasingly difficulty. But it's not until the last temple we really crank up the difficulty. But something we also added a lot early in the beginning was that there are a couple of like sequence break techniques that are quite easy to find. A lot of people find them in the normal playthrough. Basically, it's that you can chain two blocks together by jumping and putting down a block in midair, then
Mm-hmm.
jumping from it. And you can also do the same thing with the bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized this like somewhere in mid development, and that kind of opened up a whole new paths of we had to go back and basically redo a lot of the rooms to open up for this kind of sequence break. And that is still one of the best parts I think about Alva's Awakening, that you can, once you get those techniques down, you can basically go to the fourth temple right off the start. You can get the second temple in any order you want, and you can do almost any temple and any item progression in any way you want. And although it is a kind of hidden sequence break technique, a lot of people find it and have really fun doing it because they kind of feel like they are, you know, not cheating the game, but kind of outsmarting the game.
Yeah.
And it really helps them to feel like, oh, cool, I found this super secret technique, and now I can go to this place where I'm not supposed to be at. And I think that's one of the core strengths of Alpha's Awakening, that you can find your own way and still have fun exploring.
Yeah. And that I think is a very fascinating topic in itself, like about having those unintended sequence breaks or advanced tech in your game
Yeah,
and then figuring out what to do with it. Because as a
yeah,
designer, you're not really thinking about, you didn't really come up with like those advanced elements. That was done by the testers and especially about speedrunners. And I
yeah,
know Always Waiting has a speedrun mode. I never got good enough to put a good time up.
yeah,
But it's very fascinating when we see games approach those kinds of techniques because I've played other kind of movement or transversal based games that have had
yeah,
those little, those subtle elements to their maneuvers that, on the outside you don't really think about it as a designer, but then as somebody who's playing the game, as you said, it kind of leads to those aha moments of, hey, the game didn't
yeah,
want me to do that, but I just did it anyway. Now look, I just skipped this whole section.
yeah.
And it's always fun. I didn't have that. I spoke to a developer who made the game Vision Soft Reset. This was at the beginning of this year. And I
Okay.
remember, like, they had a maneuver where when you shoot down, it propels your character up. And it was kind
Yeah,
of like a pseudo double jump before the game actually introduces the double jump. And
yeah,
I spoke to him about it. I was like, oh, yeah, I knew. Like, that was a mechanic. We figured that out, and I made sure to put that in that game.
yeah.
And I think it's a very interesting discussion about, as a developer, what do you do? Like, is there a right way of when somebody finds these sequence breaks? Because I'm sure there are developers out there who, when they hear about these kinds of little tactics or things, they go, "I need to, nerf that. I need to get that out of the game." But as you were just saying, like when you found those things out, you were like, "Let's read it. Let's make these levels even more accommodating towards this tech."
Yeah, that's exactly what I remember. When there's like a early video of me, not I didn't find like the block double jump, and but I remember when I learned about it, like, oh, you can actually do this. There's like a this mobile video of me recording the screen. Oh, this is so cool. I'm showing like my wife, and she's trying to record my my video game, and I was super proud of it. But yeah, we did redesign the whole thing, and like, made sure you could block jump to different levels and stuff like that. But it was fun during development because we had a lot of testers who just sent us, "Oh, I'm here now. Am I supposed to be here?" And I'm like, "No. How the hell did you get there?" And I had to kind of retrace their steps. Okay, and okay, you went that way, you did that way. What was kind of challenging those that is that there are a bunch of keys in the game, like 10 or 15 keys in the game, and we have about the same number of locked doors, of course. But depending if you kind of skip your way out of
Mm,
the normal loop, we kind of realize, okay, now you picked up a key in this dungeon, but you used it in the kind of the wrong dungeon.
yeah.
And that led to a bunch of like design issues, which was really hard to figure out. Okay, so if you're doing this, you're picking up that key, you're dying there, respawning there. Okay, then we need to make sure you find your way back to that. And as I mentioned earlier, we released the game in February 2017, and in August last year, 1 year and a half later into its release cycle, we released the Switch version, and then we added Rumble. So all of a sudden, we had the controller to rumble once you're near a secret wall. And
Mm.
we thought that was cool because it just helped adding like, okay, here's a secret, I can hear the controller rumble. It was, of course, you could turn it off if you didn't want the hints, but that led to people finding a secret wall, which we just added in order to solve one of those game design sequence breaks that, okay, people are getting stuck in this place. So we added this secret wall, which no one ever found unless you know what you're looking for. But now all of a sudden, everyone was finding it in the Switch version and ending up another soft lock. And I was like, we just, face palm. We were like, oh God, damn, what the hell have we done? And we had to patch that out quite quickly, actually. And if I remember it correctly, we found this before the game came out, and it was like 5 days before the release. And we kind of realized, okay, everyone's going to get stuck here. Everyone's going to get stuck here, and this is an important release. So we contacted Nintendo side and said, we need to patch this quickly. And they were like, yeah, sure, just add a patch and it'll take 2 weeks before we approve it. And like,
Oh.
no, we need to patch it. It's releasing tomorrow. Like, we need to patch it now. But oh no, we can't do that. It's like a
Oh.
week wait. And we released the game, and we just went out on Twitter and said that, okay, if you get stuck here, you have to do this and this, and we had to record like a YouTube video in order to escape that secret break. And then we got it patched like a week later, and then no one else had missed that. But all in all, for a game that has like over 500 rooms, to my knowledge, you shouldn't be able to get stuck anywhere. Let's see if someone can prove me wrong, but I don't think so.
And that's always the fun challenge when you have those abilities to break the sequence. What happens if
Yeah,
you get stuck in? Because I'm pretty sure that may have led to some of my difficulties with playing Alwa's Awakening. Because as you said,
yeah,
like if you give the player a secret or put something as a skip, they're
yeah,
going to do it. Like
yeah,
people who watch me know that I instinctively always go the wrong way in games because I always know developers gotta hide something good over there. I mean, they couldn't
yeah.
possibly get me stuck in a wall or unable to get past something.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fun, but it's also fun to creating that. But it was massive headache for Elvis Legacy because you had all the different upgrades in this new game,
Hmm.
and that just opened up a whole new issue of problems because you never know what kind of item the player's gonna have in any time at the game. You have to design for each and every possibility of each item, each upgrade, each
Yep.
direction, each health, and I just remember staring like hours and hours at the map. Okay, if I put the key here, will that result in this way? And I think it's going to be very, very interesting to release the game like next spring and see what both the regular players going to do with it, but also the speedrun community, because there has to be so many things that, so many creative ways to play the game because it's basically open right from the start. You
Hmm.
choose your own path, sort of way.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting point, especially one of the things I did like about Alwa's Awakening. A lot of these kinds of, I'm not sure it would be purely movement tech based games, but just having a lot of options. Is as you said, like you always get that sense of joy figuring out I just did something. It's wasn't really planned, wasn't really expected, but I can now apply that to something
Yeah,
else. I think one of the first really great examples of that would be discovering wall jumping in something like Super Metroid. And like
yeah,
Super Metroid is probably one of the more quintessential speedrun games, just due to all the tech that's involved. And I mean, I've
yeah.
watched people play that game and do those sequence breaks, and it blows my mind, like how they can just completely skip entire like worlds and just go, oh, all those require items. We don't need that. We'll just do it
Yeah,
this way, and it works.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's fun, but it's challenging. I'm always saying like now we're closing up on we still have a lot of months of development left for Elvis Legacy, but I'm just constantly say, "Oh, the next game we'll make, like our third game, is going to be like an easy game. You have to know Metroidvania. It's just like level by level games. You don't have to consider all those thousands of possibilities that the game is going to
Yeah.
be played by different players. It's fun, but it's also massively taxing on your mind and
Yeah.
your thoughts."
Yeah, and I think I definitely want to elaborate on that for any developers watching, because I think this is another one of those very easy traps that you can fall into, and I'm sure, like as you said, that you got firsthand knowledge of that. That
Yeah,
it's very easy to give the player all manner of crazy powers, abilities, and whatnot, but if the world is not balanced around that, then you run into those situations where, okay, I balance it so the player has abilities X, Y, and A, but what do they
yeah,
come at with Y, B, and Z? How are they
yeah,
going to get through it? And again,
yeah,
like the easy answer is you just railroad everything. You can't go there because we explicitly say no. But then, as we all know, then that gets in the way of, it's a quote unquote open world. But no, not really, because you're being held by a hand to get from point A to all the way to point Z.
yeah. Exactly. But also interesting is that if you allow the player kind of right off the start, it's kind of hard to challenge, balance the difficulty. Like if you have your regular temple, second temple, third temple, fourth temple, whatever, if the player decides to go right for the fifth temple or the
Yeah.
sixth temple, right? How do you? They might be massively underpowered to battle that temple, so that's also challenging. Like, how do you know which player the way the player would go, and what if they choose the worst, like the most challenging table right off the start of the game, and then just kind of throw the game away because they think it's too hard? So that's also challenging. It's still fun, but it's also challenging.
Oh yeah, and for my audience watching, I've never done that. I never went the wrong order and did the super hard area first.
Yeah.
Now, I have a few more questions regarding Alwa's Awakening, and then we'll
Yeah.
move on to Legacy.
Sure.
For the chat watching, if you do have any questions about Alwa's Awakening, feel free to mention them now. One thing, you kind of mentioned this earlier about kind of the enemy designs. That
Yeah.
you want the enemies to kind of be there, that you really weren't engaging them, not in the same way as something like the Messenger or Ninja Gaiden. They were kind of there to facilitate the platforming. But obviously,
Yeah.
Alwa's Awakening has boss fights,
Yeah.
and the boss fights in Alwa are definitely where you are forced into combat. And I
Yeah.
want to spend like a minute or so telling more about what was the overall design philosophy for the boss fights in the game.
That's also a good question. Basically, they try your ability. Like in the first temple, you get your block. The second temple, you get the bubble, and the third temple, you get the lightning bolt, which most players play in that order. So it was easy in that sense. You just have the different mechanics of the boss challenging you, making sure you know how to use your magic block, bubble, or lightning bolt. Then we have the super challenging fourth boss, which is always fun because that's really one of the more memorable bosses. But I'd say like I didn't. We have our programmer. He's not unfortunately with us anymore on the team. Well, he's still alive, but he's not on the team anymore. He did all. So I was basically just saying, okay, this is good, this is bad, we can change this. But he mostly did the design for the bosses. I kind of try to stay clear of the most of the enemy designs and the boss designs because I was so focused on like making sure the world connected and it was fun to play. Yeah,
Hmm. Now, one thing that I thought was very unique about the bosses, I didn't see from like a lot of other games, was the idea of you picking up the orbs, and
yeah,
then by extension, the more orbs you picked up, it would cause kind of like pre-damage to the boss before you actually began the fight. And like,
yeah.
where did that design come from?
Oh wow. Hmm. The thing is, we have the blue orbs in the game, but for the longest time we had the red orbs as well, and the red orbs were kind of meant to work as a currency. Like we didn't want gold. I'm sounding like a pacifist here, but we wanted to make sure the game, as I mentioned, wasn't based on fighting and it wasn't based on money. Like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
aspects of your life where you're chasing money, so we want to make sure that the game didn't. collect gold or coins or stuff like that. So we ended up choosing red orbs, which we kind of meant to be like a substitute for the currency. But for the longest time, we couldn't really figure out what we wanted to do with it. And we had them in order to encourage the explore, to
Yeah.
find some rewards when they went off the straight path and stuff like that. But at the end, we cut them, and the reason for it hitting bosses and damage to the bosses, I can't really remember what led to that. I remember we struggled a lot because we wanted to make sure the player could upgrade and have some sort of achieving a new level and stuff like that, but we didn't want to make the player feel that they need to grind anything. So having it damage bosses was like a way off, because it was good. Like if you have a lot of blue orbs, you do a lot of damage on the bosses, then that would help a lot. But if you didn't have a lot of orbs, you wasn't punished, and also that you could still finish it if you hadn't got the pattern down.
Hmm. And something
Yeah,
like a very like interesting way, as you said, to promote exploration, but
yeah,
without making it a required part. Because that's another thing we see from a lot of modern retro games, or from a lot of these titles, where it's optional, but no, not really. Because if you don't get that stuff, you won't be strong enough to fight the boss, or you'll get stuck at a section.
yeah. Yeah, I think like we also, when we had the whole like the currency stuff like that. I always think when games have the currency punish you, it kind of feels like you're taken aback if you lose the currency. There are a lot of games like Dark Souls where you get with the punish. I love Dark Souls, but it's always punishing to have to redo stuff like that. So we made sure that once you pick something up in Alwa's Awakening, you keep it forever. And
Mm-hmm.
having the blue orbs attack the bosses, I think that worked pretty well. Although most people kind of end up having you know only collect half of the orbs, but still very useful once you get a lot of orbs,
Mm-hmm.
especially at the later bosses, especially like the end boss. If
Oh
you have,
yes.
yeah, if you have like a lot of orbs and you have the power ups, you do double damage. Then that boss is quite easy, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about the bosses, like, what was like your favorite boss from a design standpoint, or do you have
Oh,
one?
I'd say like there's this sea monk guy in the third temple. He's like part octopus, part man, and he has these waterfalls coming out of the ground. I think that's pretty cool because you really have to dodge his projectiles, and you really have to pixel perfect time the jumps when he has raised his waterfalls. And I just like the design of the guy. And I wanted to bring him back for Alva's Legacy, but we haven't had time to do that yet. But the Sea Monkey, the third temple, he's by far my favorite. But I say when it comes down to pixels, like the final boss, the dragon boss, is really well done by our artist Bege. He's really talented.
All right. I need to replay the game again. It's been, I think, a few months since I last went through it too, just to
Yeah,
reacquaint myself.
me
But
too.
as a quick time check, we are about 50 minutes into the cast. I
Yeah,
do want to switch over talking more about Alwa's legacy, so we'll probably spend maybe another, I would say 20, 25 minutes if you're good on that.
sure.
And before we do that, is there any aspect of Alwa's awakening that we didn't touch on that you would like to bring up?
Not design wise, I'd say, but I mentioned it started out as a development game, like an Espero game back in 2014, 2015. And what's fun, what this game is that there is a guy called Paul who's actually doing a kind of like a fan port of the game. So he's redoing the whole game,
Hmm,
but in actual on NES hardware. So
nice.
he's live streaming on each Wednesday, and that's going to be it's quite fun to follow. And we've redone all the rooms, so we redid all the rooms, which are close to 500, and they use a modern 16 by 9 layout. So we had to remake all the rooms to fit into a 4 by 3 like an NES old television. And that was also quite a challenge because all of a sudden you kind of lose like 40% of the room area you have in each room. So you got to make sure that, okay, this jump is 2 tiles,
Yeah.
and now you have to make sure this is 1 tile, or okay, you can't have 3 jumps, you have to have 2 jumps. But we successfully remade all rooms, and the next step is now to implement our rooms into his code and see if we can play the game on an NES. And hopefully it will be a finished product sometime soon. That could be like 2020 or 2021. We don't know. It's fun to see it actually becoming an NES game finally.
Nice, and we're seeing a lot of that coming from the independent and modern retro space of,
Yeah,
having their own cartridges and their own chips printed up and having these games ran. I know the studio, I think it's Mega Cat Games or Mega Cat Studios. They
yeah,
like do their own like cartridge manufacturing like on site for some of their games, and like it's one of those things that if you're not like in the know, it just sounds completely like alien to you. Why are they making
yeah,
Genesis games? It's
yeah,
2019 now. Why are people
yeah,
still
exactly.
talking about that?
Yeah, but it's fun. It's fun. Mega Cat Studios are actually the one who's we did release the soundtrack, so you could play it in NES like the soundtrack, and Mega Cat Studios did that for us. So
Nice.
they're really talented and have good sense for quality.
Hmm. And actually, that just brings up like one quick question. Then, as you said, you switched to Unity with developing
Yep.
Alwa's Awakening. For like developers watching this, how was it? I guess designing like a 2D like pixel-based platformer in Unity, because I. And again, like this could be like an hour-long answer, so you don't need to go, super in depth.
Yeah, I'd say quite complicated back in
Oh.
4 years or so, but pixel art, I mean, Unity wasn't designed primarily for pixel art. I mean, it's called Unity 3D. So pixel art was kind of hard to get the proper scaling and stuff like that. We have to resize it to different screen resolutions and stuff like that. And we used this external plugin which helped us resize the pixels so they stayed crisp, but still quite a lot of work. And I think we did succeed in making it look authentic, but there are still a lot of techno issues that came with it. Like it's like if you play Mega Man, like every millimeter of every pixel is like perfect. But when you're using Unity, like at least for what we did in a few years ago, it was hard to get that pixel perfect feeling. Although I think we came as close as you can do while using Unity. Now, though, in 2019, Unity has their own Pixel Perfect plugin, which works really well. So we haven't had really any problems with Pixel for Alva's Legacy. It worked really, really well.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. I think with that, let's talk a little bit more about Alwa's legacy then, from a design standpoint, and then that will
yeah,
probably take us to the end of the stream.
yeah,
So, as we said at the beginning, Alwa's Awakening ends with the twist of going from 8-bit to 16, and then
yeah,
Alwa's legacy is kind of, I guess no pun intended, keeping that legacy alive with
yeah,
moving things forward. So,
yeah.
we kind of already mentioned some of the changes at the beginning of the cast, but for anyone new watching this, live or recorded, so where does Alwa's legacy take us within this world?
It kind of picks up right where the first started. Um, and I won't delve too much into the story part of the game because we haven't really actually finalized everything. So we want to make sure we have our own story correct before we actually talk about it. But it'll start you off right at the same screen where the first game ended. But there are things that happen this time. Like you have kind of respawned at the same point, but for a new reason. You're not really sure why, but some people in the world know why you spawned there and what you're gonna need to do. Um, but so you kind of set out in this world, and a lot of things will be familiar, but a lot of things will be completely new. So if you play the first game, you'll recognize a few characters. You'll probably recognize an area or two. But if you haven't played the first game, you don't really have to know anything about it. Like we've designed Aldous Legacy to be a complete standalone game because we wanted to make sure that no one who picks up Aldous Legacy feel like they're missing out on something that they didn't play the first game. Like if you pick up a Zelda game now, you don't have to play like the first 25 Zelda games or how many there are. Like you can just pick up Breath of the Wild and have a good time, and that's kind of what we wanted to go with for Aldous Legacy as well.
Now, with the update to 16-bit graphics, obviously the end I was awaiting kind of hinted at that. Was
Yeah,
that the original plan for having that kind of graphical update for Legacy?
No, there wasn't really any plans. We
Oh,
just struggled having like a cool ending.
I'm sorry,
And
your sound kind of went out there just before you answer that question.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I said that when we did the Elvis Way sequel, so the ending kind of came from. I say it was inspired by a talk by Ron Gilbert, like the creator of Maniac Mansion and all those old adventure games, like Monkey Island and stuff like that. And he did a talk like in Australia a few years ago when he talked about the ending to Monkey Island 2, which kind of divides people. Like a lot of people love the ending to Monkey Island 2 and hate it. Like I love it. I think it's awesome. And I played the game with my wife and she absolutely hated it. And that's the same feeling we had for the ending with Dallas Awakening, that it kind of divides people in two. Like a lot of people like it and a lot of people don't like it. But the cool thing about it is that like the game's been out for 2.5 years and we're still talking about the ending. It's like I get a lot of comments about it. Like just the other day, someone talked about the ending. I was awakening. So it didn't really come from a vision of making a sequel. It just came from that we wanted to do something cool, and we thought doing like a 16-bit remake of the first game was cool, and then it ends abruptly. Um, but it fit perfectly. Like now when we started making Elvis Wake, we built on that style. Although it kind of looks different from the screenshot we have in Elvis Awakening. We compared to what we do now, we have a huge, much bigger resolution, and much cooler effect. It looks a lot better, to be honest.
Hmm. And I'm watching the footage that you have up on the Kickstarter now, and it
Yeah,
definitely looks a lot more impressive in terms of not only the graphical style, but kind of like the animations of things that's going on.
yeah, yeah, and that came from us not having any the animation styles, and with there are so much many more pixels to use with because so is Sprite, so is the main character. It's a bit taller and a bit wider, which helps a lot animating. We did realize that having a bigger resolution and bigger characters and bigger sprites and everything, that it requires a lot more time. So animating all this has taken a lot of time. That's why we still have a lot more work to do when it comes to animation. But
Hmm.
yeah, our BG once again, our pixel artist has done a tremendous job animating
Hmm.
all the enemies and characters.
Yep. Now, as you said earlier in the cast, in terms of some like the new features that you have with
Yeah,
Alwa's Legacy, that in terms of like the powers, I'm watching the footage on the Kickstarter now. I see,
yeah,
of course, the block and the square, or block, bubble, and the lightning. Are there
yeah.
any like new mechanics like involving like movement tech or anything like that, or is it still too early or not really like part of this design?
We have the ability system, and those will primarily affect your movement. And
Okay.
those they are four, and they work in conjunction with your attack. So yeah, we have the abilities, but they were kind of hard to show in the trailer to give them because you have to weigh how much you want to spoil, how much you want to show, and it was kind of hard to show those in the trailer. But there are something we call abilities, and they work really well.
Okay. Now the world itself, like
Yeah.
obviously, you're keeping within like the same kind of area as the first game. Is it going to be, or are there going to be like new areas to actually explore in Alwa's Legacy?
Yeah, there's going to be like
Oh.
areas and enemies and stuff like that. And we don't really reuse any of the areas in that sense. Few of them in the beginning, but yeah, there are a lot of different areas, and we made sure that they not just feel like a palette swap or the same area in another color, but that each area have a unique look, a unique sound, a unique enemy, a unique boss, and a unique quirk, or you need to utilize a specific mechanic in each area. And they all interconnect very nice as well, which was also massive amount of work.
Hmm. And I guess with Alwa's Legacy, are you doing anything different in terms of, I guess, game philosophy or the design philosophy of the game compared to Awakening?
Yes, like we didn't have a proper design document like that described what we wanted to do. Instead, the design document kind of came from that we went through basically all the reviews that ever came out of this way. and just read up, okay, what did people like and what didn't people like, and we compiled this list of like 10 common complaints about Alice Awakening. None were fatal, like there were small flaws, but like the most common issues people had with the game, and we set out to, okay, how do we fix these? And then we basically took like everything we liked from the first game. We took this list and fixed all items on that, and that was kind of the whole design philosophy. Like, how do we fix everything that we
Hmm.
didn't that people didn't seem to like in the first game? And I think we've succeeded on. To be honest, like 8 out of 10, probably 9 out of 10, and we have 6 months left of development. So hopefully we can get 10 out of 10 eventually.
Hmm. I guess I guess without going to like too far into spoilers, like
Yeah.
what would be like a good example of something that was improved in Legacy compared to Awakening?
Movement was by far the biggest complaint. Like, we thought it was good. Like, we didn't want to make this super fast action platforming game. We want to make this game where you kind of slowly walk through different dungeons and you reflect and you solve these puzzles. Like, it was never meant to be a fast action game. I was waiting, but I was like, this way faster. It's still not like an action game, but she runs and she jumps and you can dash and you can do all this quick movement, so you can easily quite make it through each rooms very, very much faster compared to the first game. But so we cranked up like everything, her animation, her run speed, and she basically runs everything. And this led to interesting like design issues, because all of a sudden, like, she could just breathe through two rooms very, very quickly, because like two quick jumps and you're basically just moving through a whole room. So that was also a part of the design. Like, how do we keep the momentum of making sure she moves fast, but still we create interesting rooms that allows you to solve puzzles. But once again, I think we've have a good like balance between faster rooms and slower, more puzzle-oriented rooms. But her movement was by far one of the biggest complaints. We even had players that just played like 5 minutes and then gave us a bad Steam review because the movement was so. I don't agree, but I totally can understand if people feel that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting point about kind of like the speed or the gait of the character in these kinds of games. Because,
Yeah,
as you said, like for a lot of these like older school games, they're meant to be on the slower side. But I
yeah,
think for the player who's going through it, like when you have that slow speed combined with like a lot of exploration, I think it does
yeah,
start to like wear on the person, knowing, did I miss
yeah,
something 20 rooms back? I gotta walk all the way back there, then
yeah,
come all the way back here. And it's one of those things I think that no matter how fast you make it, everybody's going to want to still be a little bit faster. Like, even I've
yeah,
had that where I've played games where it's like you start out very slow. I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. Let me get a speed upgrade. I get the speed upgrade, and then I'm still like, I'm still so slow. I won't go even faster than even with the
yeah.
speed upgrade.
Yeah, but that's just part of the society as well. Like, delving, like everything's everything should be quicker, faster. And you don't really have anyone. Nobody really has any attention span nowadays, and I think that's just very like clearly shown in game designs of today's modern games. Like, no one has time for anything, and if you get stuck for like 5 minutes, you throw that game away and start something else. And that's kind of not the games I want to make. I kind of want to make actually have to sit down and think. I'm not sure there's a market for it, but they are fun to make, and these are the kind of games I want to make. So yeah,
Hmm. Now, with the Kickstarter right now, as we said, we can't go too far into telling the design of Legacy because obviously it's not out yet. In
yeah.
terms of, I guess, like enemies or boss designs, have you thought
Yeah.
about any kind of new or like updated elements to them?
Yeah, definitely. For the first game, Alwa's Awakening, there was just me, a programmer, and a guy who made like the core team of 4 people. And 3 of us are still in the team, but we've upgraded to another music artist, another sound designer, and a second pixel artist. And that kind of led us to, we had 2 programmers for the longest of time. Our programmer who did Alwa's Awakening left the company like 3 months ago, but up until then, he worked on it for more than a year. So we had two programmers, which led to us having one dedicated guy and all the enemies. So I mean, it's not going to be like a full AI, super advanced AAA
Mhm.
kind of enemy, but it's still going to be more advanced than the first day. We try to create more interesting characters and enemies, and they have attacks, and they have more frames, and they have more sounds. They kind of act differently. Um, and yeah, the bosses as well are more very, very much unique and bigger, right? Much bigger on screen, both when it comes to design and how they look.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else like design wise. So we kind of hit a lot of different topics. I guess
Yeah.
with the move to 16-bit, like as you
Yeah.
said, you went through a lot in terms of trying to correct any issues or criticisms with Alwa's Awakening. Are there
Yeah.
any other aspects of that move in terms of graphical or aesthetic style that kind of influenced the design of the game?
Mm, yes, I'd say one like kind of hard to explain, but we're using. I mean, the game is tile based, so you have these patterns of bricks and background tiles and stuff like that. And when the first game, Alwa's Awakening, it was quite easy to. Okay, you had your sky, you had your mountain, you had your brick, and you had your closing brick, like, and you had your yellow brick, and you had your green stuff like that. It was quite easy to design levels using that. What we realized when we did, still realizing now where we're making Alwa's Legacy is that there's so much more to choose from, and there's so many different tiles. So in order to properly design this game, we had to come up with a way that we can actually use the level design program to mock up a level quite easily. So basically, what we're doing is that we do a room, but we white box it. Like we only have these like one colored tiles for all the different areas, and we have one colored tile for. And then we have this system in our level editor which swaps the old tiles to different. So that led to kind of, I wouldn't say a tile-based design, but we realized if we want to go and make this half a tile or three tiles and stuff like that, it's going to be a massive amount of work because each room is so much bigger and there's so many tiles to choose from. So that took a lot of time getting a proper balance between how do we work fast to create the room and how do we make them so they don't feel like they were mocked up in a level edit.
Hmm.
I think we're getting there now, and but there's still a lot of time that's going to be spent on polishing the level. Like you have to place your cracks, you have to place your flowers, and rocks and shading and all of that. That was something we underestimated how much work it would be making this kind of high bit pixel art game. But although people call it 16-bit, it's not like the resolution is so much bigger than any could handle. Like and it's 16 by 9, and it's more tiles, and it's just every room is massive amount of tiles in it. So a lot of work, and I'd say that kind of implicated the design, but ended up being good at all because we have this good workflow now, which we can easily make a room and it looks brilliant in just like this and styling and everything. But still a lot of rooms to make.
I mean, I think it's always that very interesting challenge when you're doing 2D design like this, because we had this discussion, or I had a discussion with another developer a few days ago, as we discussed, like whenever you have like those changes, either how the levels are formulated or even just how the character moves, by
Yeah,
extension, that changes everything around them. It's not
yeah,
something you really think about in 3D all that much because people are used to kind of like the more natural movement of a 3D character. But
yeah,
with like 2D, as you said, like if you want to make something like half a tile wide or change that kind of width, that changes how everything gets connected to it, and even how that character jumps and responds to that object.
yeah, exactly. And I'd say it was so many tiles. Like you have these bricks, and although it feels simple to say it's just bricks, but making them sure they tile together, it was a massive amount of work, and we had to spend a lot of time making sure we could build levels. But now we have a good workflow, and actually next week or so we're going to put up a video like where we show how we make one room by using our level editor, and that's going to be quite interesting, and it's going to be everyone's going to see how a lot of it's going to take a lot of time to make just one room in the game, but we're getting there. But it's challenging. It's fun though. It's kind of nice to see the room shape before your eyes, take shape before your eyes.
Nice. And let's see. Oh, one thing that we didn't touch on, I figured I'd give you a chance to talk about. How is the
Yep.
music? Is it being improved or like changed for Alwa's Legacy?
I wouldn't say changed. It's basically more of the stuff we had in the first game. Our musician who did Elvis was sick leave when we started a production of Elvis Legacy, so we couldn't work with him. But we went with Rushet One, who's this very, very, very talented ship musician. He worked with a lot of different games, including 1001 Spikes, and he worked with PewDiePie for both his games. And I'd say what changed is that we're using more channels, like you have a more modern sound, but it's still in chip music. But I think that really works well with the style we're having, and we're very fortunate to have talented. But another cool thing we did add was that we have like modern sound design, because in Alwa's Awakening we just had like the what do you call it, like 8-bit sound effects, like everything was made in the same
Mm-hmm.
program with all the tracks in. But now we have actual sound effects. And that was quite a big step for us because we're pixel, like old school NES nerds. So actually having real sound effects in the game, like you actually hear water, you hear fire, you hear steps, that was some time getting used to. But now once we have everything sounding really, really good in the game. We had help from a guy called Yuval who worked with Electronic Arts, and he worked with Soin Games, and he done VR games. And the sound effects are massively impressive. Like you can play the game without having any music on, and it's so enjoyable just hearing all these footsteps and the enemies and the ambient sound. If you're in a cave, you have this ambient sound. Like it's a joy to play. Like even if you have the music, and with the music on, it's a also really, really good because we have all the effects. So I think that was a big step for us to go modern sound effects. But in hindsight, I don't can't understand why we hesitated. It became so really, really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
And just like watching like the footage that you have up on the Kickstarter, I mean, it does look so much bigger and more expansive compared to the first game.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It expands on everything, and it's still in a reasonable scope. Like it's still reasonable, but that's one of the reasons we're asking the lovely community on Kickstarter to help us out, because we have a bit more months left of development, although we are getting close to, like, we have added basically all the content is done. We just need like a 6 month or so to just polish everything up, because so many rooms and so many tiles
Yeah.
and so many different things to polish up. But all in all, we're in a pretty good pace, and once we get funded, we'll have enough cash to survive for 6 or 7 months.
And again, I definitely want to give you the best of luck with getting to that goal. But
Thank you so much.
I think I am just about out of questions. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. If the chat has any final questions about Alwa's legacy, definitely get them in right now. I guess throwing it to you, anything that we didn't touch on for Alwa's legacy yet?
Not really. I mean, the basic is that we're doing Steam and we're doing Switch, like launch early next spring is the plan once we're funded, and then eventually down the road do a PS4 and Xbox One and a GOG games release. That's the plan. We've done Switch and Steam before for Alwa's Awakening, so we're confident to it. And no, it's going to be one heck of a game. If you liked anything about Alwa's Awakening, you'll definitely love Alwa's Legacy. Like took everything that was good from Alwa's Awakening and removed all the bar parts and just made it better looking, sounder, and cooler, and with much more fun mechanics. So we're super excited to get the game out there early next year in the spring.
Great. So I guess I gotta ask one question though. Is the twist ending of Alwa's legacy going to take the game into 32-bit? Or are you going to keep it or go beyond that?
Yeah, we have some crazy ideas. but you're gonna have to play the game to find out how it's ending.
All right. I guess one final question. I don't know how long this will
Yeah.
be. Has there been any considerations or thoughts about speedrunners for Alwa's Legacy? Again, one like the more interesting things was how people took to the first game. Have you given
Yeah.
any like new considerations for speedrunning with Legacy?
Yeah. There in Sweden we have a lot of talented, and they were of Alwa's Awakening. So during the development, we had a lot of help and input from speedrunners. We've just now finished the demo, and as we're speaking now, one of the most known Swedish speedrunners is actually playing the game, and I'm terrified what he has able to find during the. He's basically the world premiere, and he's been streaming for an hour now. So I'm gonna check the stream and see if he completely wrecked everything or all the bugs. But yeah, the thing is, when we open up the skill tree and the way for the player to choose their own way, we kind of open up a Pandora's box
Yeah.
of the endless possibilities to destroy and to play this game in any way you want. And I'm 50% terrified and 50% super excited to see what the speedruns community is going to do with this game. Hopefully, it's going to be an active speedrun community as the first game. But we're in that point right now where we're going to start sending out the game and see what people can do with it. But it has been designed from a speedrun perspective right off the start, I'd say.
Nice. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely a discussion we had about giving the player the ability to customize their experience. And that
Yeah.
would probably be like another full hour or so. And I know that I think there's a 6 hour time difference, so it's probably getting very late for you.
Yeah, it's past 10 here, but it's okay. The party is still going.
All right. But I think that is it in terms of my questions. So,
Yeah.
to wrap things up, for people watching, you already mentioned the platforms for Alwa's
Yeah.
Legacy. So that's Switch, PS4, Xbox One, GOG, and Steam. In
Yeah.
terms of a release date, if you guys are able to hit your funding, do you have an estimated idea for when the game will be done?
Nothing more than spring 2020. That's the goal. It says April on the kick. That's what we're aiming for. But yeah, April 2020 is our goal.
Okay. Now, you've already mentioned that there is the backer demo for the game. Are you planning
Yeah.
on having a public demo for people to try out at some point?
Not at this time. This is the first time we're doing any kind of demo on 8 years, so it's going to be exciting and scary to have a demo because there's like two parts to having a demo. Like some people say it's good and some people say it's not good to have a demo. So it's going to be fun to have the backer demo to see what we'll get from that. But no plans for a public demo now, but we are going to collect like all the backer who get the demo is going to be able to join us on Discord and be able to feedback directly on the game and make sure they get their feedback. And we can do whatever changes the community with the community think they want, which we should be able to do with the next 6 months or so.
Okay. In
Yeah.
terms of social media, are there any places you'd
Yeah.
like to plug right now for the people watching live or recorded?
Yes, if you want to follow the development or get in touch with us, we're Elden Pixels at basically all social media. Like we primarily use Twitter, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch and Discord. And it's ELDN Pixels, ELDEN Pixels, one word. That's where you can follow us. And if you want to follow me, I'm Michael Forstland on Twitter. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me or Eldon, and we'll answer you as soon as we can. Although we are a bit clogged right now because the the social media account is going crazy with all the retweets and comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but
And,
we'll get there in time.
all right. And I'll include a links to the Kickstarter and everything down below in the description on the recorded version. Other
Thank
than
you so
that,
much.
I guess my final question then is: do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans watching this right now to end the cast on?
Thank you so much. I mean, when we released Alva's Awakening, we didn't have like we joked if we had like sold 10 copies, it'd still be worth it because we had so much fun and it was such a fun experience. And we're thankful that we've sold a lot more than 10 copies, and we were able to continue this Alva's journey for hopefully many years to come. And everything that we have like came from our community. So we're super super thankful for that, and it really has helped us reach far with our Kickstarter as well. So thank you everyone for supporting us.
Awesome. So, I think with that, we will be ending things for this week's cast. Be sure to check out the Kickstarter for Alwa's Legacy. I'll include a link to that in the description down below. And if I get a chance, we'll do a play of the demo of the game as well, and we'll put a link to that somewhere in the description of this video when it goes up. But,
Cool.
Michael, again, it has been great hanging out with you. My afternoon, your evening. Good luck with
Yes,
the rest of the Kickstarter, and hopefully in the future we can have you back on and talk more about the development of the game when it's finally out.
that would be super fun, and I'd love to be back. Thank you so much for.
Alright, not a problem. So, with that, we're going to be ending for the cast. As always, if you'd like to follow me, I am on Twitter at GWBicer. If you want to join our Discord, it is linked down below, as well as our Patreon. And I'll be back later tonight for our regular game streaming. And if you are a developer working on your own game or just like talking about design and would like to come on, feel free to send me a message. We're always looking for new guests. But with that said, thank you for tuning in to this week's cast and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.